Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everyone. My name is Nancy Rapando. I work as the WWF Africa Food Future Leaders, supporting the network on food system transformation across our Africa offices. So within WWF, the reason why we're engaging on food system is because we want an ecological food system, a food system that supports biodiversity, a food system that is resilient, but a food system that also supports people. But why do we take this system approach in looking at the food system? We are coming from a world where we've been looking at the value chain approach. In the value chain approach, it's all been about moving from pre-production to production, then to markets, and then to consumers. But the food system approach allows us to look at the different drivers and impacts of a food system. So when you look at a food system like an African food system, a major driver is actually population growth. We are also having climate change being a major driver in the food system. In looking at such such factors, the impacts of the increasing population on natural resources is too high. And also this is being worsened by the increasing climate change impacts. So what is happening in Africa is that when we are having these water stresses, people, there are coming a lot of conflicts between humans, but also between humans and wildlife, because wildlife also need water. But also another impact is that as the population increases, as the climate continues affecting some of the production areas, we have people moving towards conservation areas, towards fragile ecosystems like forests. And yet these ecosystems are critical buffer zones where our wildlife exists, critical buffer zones where our nutrients exist. These are areas that are more connected with our rainfall systems. So as these areas get converted, then we have again the feedback loop where we have negative impacts going to affect again the farming communities because they will not have enough nutrient flows. We are not going to have enough water flows. So these environmental flows that are required to support food systems then become inadequate, and that affects food production in terms of quantity and quality. So I hope this is quite understood from an ecological basis, but also from a social basis. We are dealing with people. For us as Africa, food is not just a commodity in the shop to be taken home, but it is a social aspect that brings us together. When we are having festivals, it's all about food. Cultures are defined by food. So when people do not have adequate food, when people are hungry, then that dignity in a family and also that social cohesion becomes affected. So we are engaging on food as an institution for ecology, to support the ecological system, but also to support the social system to continue with its own functions. So I also wanted to talk about some of the analysis that we have actually done in terms of the interdependence of the food system and the environmental issues. What is happening is that we have done a study. The Africa Ecological Food Futures is a study that we have undertaken. And this study actually brings out those factors of environment, of climate, population, and how the people are pushing into conservation areas. When you come to a place like Kenya, what has happened is that a major critical landscape that was meant for wildlife, there's a lot of mosaic crop production in these areas. So these landscapes are actually being converted to cater for people and livelihoods. So what we are doing as WWF in the initiative that I lead, which is the Africa Food Future Initiative that I identified early, we are supporting communities to understand that they don't have to get into these spaces. They can intensify within the areas they are producing using good agroecological practices. Another thing that we are rooting for is actually integrated land and water use planning and management. We need to plan these resources to ensure that we optimize land and resource use in these areas and reduce on resource-related conflicts. The third aspect is actually on sustainable value chains. Markets are critical, but markets need to be focused towards sustainability so that they're actually pulling these sustainable products that are being produced, but they're also incentivizing production of sustainable products. So in terms of that, another thing that I want to say is that we have a lot of support tools that we are actually using. And one of the support tools is actually the food puzzle tool. The initial assessments were actually done in 4 countries, and one of them being Kenya. And this actually comes up with a number of levers that we need to actually work with. And I think a critical lever for us is the issue of optimizing land use, as I have talked about. Land tenure is very critical. This is a social issue because the people who are farming, and especially farmers around conservation areas, they don't have a secure land tenure, and that actually affects their investment in land. So this is also a critical aspect that we have to work on in Africa and ensure that however temporary it is, these farmers secure their land and are able to invest in best practices that are ecologically sustainable. The other aspect that in Africa is very critical is around research and knowledge. And when it comes to knowledge, we are talking about co-creation. How can we co-create knowledge together with communities to identify best practices that are critical and that actually can support the resilience of these landscapes? In terms of research, it is becoming critically important that we work with research organizations. As WWF, we work with National Research Organization and the CG system to actually develop nature positive practices that are actually good for this landscape in terms of people, they're good for nature, and they're also good for the climate. So that becomes very critical. Have we taken any decisions differently with support of the levers? Yes. We keep on relooking at how do we continuously advance knowledge on ecological food futures in Africa, because this is not common. So we are working with governments, we are working at the national level, at the sub-national level, and the continental level in strengthening capacities to understand nature positive food systems. We are doing a number of studies. We've come up with case studies. We have a case study booklet for Kenya, and this case study is actually aimed at providing knowledge on what it means to farm as you take care of the landscape resources that are existing. So for me as a parting shot, I know this is a training and I need to take a very short time. We need to take a holistic food system pathway because at the moment globally, we are looking at the convergence agenda, where you are looking at the climate, food, and biodiversity nexus. So it's important that we understand that the food system is happening within this holistic framework. So we're working within a holistic system where the environment is critical, people are inside the ecosystem, and we are having also biodiversity. So what is happening is that if we don't consider all these factors, then we will not be having, we will not be advancing towards a sustainable food system. So I actually want to stop there and say that as students who are studying in this system, the understanding of a food system and how it operates is critical. And as we advance towards a sustainable food system, issues of climate, issues of biodiversity, and also the social issues are very critical. Thank you so much, and thank you for listening.